The Black Cat Lounge is sponsored by Paranormal Oddities, the little store with the big heart, Niagara at the Western Block, one of the top-rated haunted destinations in Western New York, Dragonfly Art and Soul, metaphysical goods and classes, Mystery Control, your go-to feed for science, magic, true crime, paranormal, and much, much more. Hey everybody, Tim Shaw here. Thank you so much for being here on another Tuesday night. I've got to tell you that, before I bring my guest out, I just want to thank everybody for coming out to the Western Block last night. And we had a great time and I really enjoyed it. We always have fun when we're out there, and I hope all the participants did too. Also, on Saturday, May 10th, I'm going to be at Concordia Cemetery, and I'm just going to briefly give you a little rundown of it. It was actually put together in I believe it was the mid 1800s. There's over 17,000 residents there. And what's unique about it is the fact that there was a legal thing that happened. The board and the president took off with all the monies that would in perpetuity that would take care of the cemetery, and it fell into disrepair for many, many years. A group of volunteers saw the need, went in, and now it is a vibrant piece of property within Buffalo's East Side, Buffalo, New York's East Side. It's an amazing effort that they've done. It's 100% volunteer, and I have some relatives that are actually buried there. Also, it's the only place that has an actual stone, a monument with a curse in German on the side of it. So it's really great. But we're going to be talking about Victorian mourning rituals, and I'm going to bring part of my collection there, and we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about just briefly the rise of spiritualism. And they will have a grieving room, a wake room for a 9-year-old boy who died in the 1800s, and what it was like during that period. So please, if you guys get a chance, it's a free talk. We ask for donations, and I really appreciate everything that you guys do for us. Anyway, I got to tell you guys, I am so excited about tonight's show. Our guest, our guest is an amazing person. And the reason why I'm saying he's amazing is because I've written a couple books. This guy has written a library. I have a small library of books. This guy has literally hundreds, maybe over 1,000 books. He's an amazing person. I love hearing him speak. He really is a giving guy that really takes the time out to make sure everybody understands what he's talking about and the subjects. He has a deep passion for the subjects that he tackles. Anyway, my guest tonight is a sought-after speaker, media personality, prolific author, paranormal investigator who has appeared on TV's Case Files, Haunted Hospitals, Paranormal Revenge, Paranormal Night Shift, Paranormal, I got to keep worrying about saying the P's, Paranormal 911, Destination Fear, A Haunting, and that's just to name a few. Richard's a great Civil War buff. I love seeing him on the battlefields. He is amazing. His grasp of the terrain and the grasp of the troop movements, truly, truly awesome. Truly awesome. If you ever get a chance to wander the fields with him, please do it. Please do it. He's also someone who makes a difference in the community. He is a paramedic, and that is not an easy endeavor. It's an amazing, an important part of all of our lives. And, I'm really, again, I am so, so honored he's here. And, tonight we're going to be discussing one of his latest books, and it's amazing. I was just talking to him off the air. My wife and I are true crime and serial killer junkies. I think it's the history behind it that really intrigues us. But we actually, now I had heard about this case, but I never really like kind of logically set it in my brain, because I'm always looking at like more darker subjects and locations and that sort of thing. But I found it on Hulu. I found this doc on Hulu about the case, and it was well done. But I found out that this gentleman has written a book. This book here, The Horrors of Fox Hollow Farm: Unraveling the History and Hauntings of a Serial Killer's Home. It is amazing. And I'm just going to tell you something. The Hulu doc is well done. Doesn't go into any of the paranormal stuff that Richard has done. And it glosses over a couple things that are so important. It kind of leaves people wanting more. And I didn't understand a couple pieces in there. So Richard actually, his explanation of the murders is unparalleled. He also has the current property owner. He's written a chapter in this book, and to me, that just tells me that there's such legitimacy within this project. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the Black Cat Lounge the incredible Richard Estep. Richard, how are you, my friend?
Tim, it's good to see you. I'm doing well, and I hope you are too.
I'm doing fantastic. I'm doing so much better now that I've got you on the air. And I think I wrote to you before after I finished the book. I went and I had so many other questions. And you really went and you solidified. You were able. You have a manner, and it's a skill. And as a writer, your skills are unparalleled, because people can take something that is this dark, this evil, this brutal, and bog it down, where you were able to go and keep the importance and the reverence of, especially of the victims involved, but you're able to go and write it in a manner in which it is a great, easy read. Have you always been able to do that? I'm just, and this is coming from someone who's just interested in your skill set.
I try and write the way I like to read these kind of books, and I grew up on books that were written in a similar vein, by writers like Peter Underwood and so on.
Yeah.
So I try and I like that you are there approach.
Yes.
And my favorite kind of correspondence to receive from readers is people usually from overseas, and overseas to wherever the location is, because I write about UK locations and Canadian locations also. And they'll say, I felt as if I was there with you, and I probably will never get to visit this place. Thank you for taking me along, which is my intent.
And you did it. I have to say that I watched the doc first.
Mm-hmm.
So I was aware of it mentally. I was aware of different locations and different aspects of it. However, the way that you crafted your sentences, I was able to visualize even more. And that to me is this, it's really the mark of a great writer. So thank you very much for that. Well, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this case. Could you just tell people that may not be familiar with it, kind of what the Fox Hollow Farm murder case is kind of all about, and we can kind of carry it on from there.
Yeah, I can't take credit for this description, but it fits so well, and it came from one of the interviewees in the TV series. A man called Herb Baumeister was the Jeffrey Dahmer you never heard of, and it has always kind of surprised me that more people aren't aware of this man, because he killed. The number is still uncertain, but it's in the double digits. That is not Herb Baumeister that just flashed up, by the way. That is Rob Graves, my
That's
colleague.
Rob Graves. We got to make sure that
Yeah,
I there we
that
go.
is Herb Baumeister. Let's not get
Yes.
too confused. He looks
Yes.
pretty ordinary, right? He looks like, I don't know, he'd sell you a car or sign off on your loan or something like that. But he's kind of got those cold, dead eyes going on. So Herb, his nickname was Weird Herb, which I think weird is one of those, and weirdo is one of those terms that we've claimed back. You know, it's no longer an insult most of the time. I call myself a weirdo and I'm proud of it, and a lot of people in the community do. But he was weird in the bad sense, and that his nickname was not flattering. This was a man that was fairly successful in business, owned a chain of discount stores. You know, think like Dollar General kind of stores, and this was in Indianapolis in the early '90s. So they were called Save a Lot, and he bought this about 18-acre home along with his wife in Carmel called Fox Hollow Farm. Now, his secret life was that when his wife and kids were away for the weekend, usually visiting their lake house, he would go into Indianapolis, which was a fairly short drive away. He would go to gay clubs and he would pick up men there. He would tell them that he was sometimes a construction worker that was working on this house with a pool in the basement, and that he had access all weekend and he had some liquor and maybe had some party drugs. And did they want to come back and party with him? And to me, one of the key points about this case that we need to bear in mind is he was preying on these very vulnerable members of society. The gay community in the early and mid 90s, they were outcasts, they were ostracized, you know.
Exactly.
So these men started disappearing. And they were going back to Fox Hollow Farm with Herb Baumeister, where they would be murdered, then essentially dismembered, and their bodies disposed of in the woods behind the farm. Never buried. They were burned, they were mangled, crushed, chopped up, but never buried. And so the animals, the woodland critters, would take these bones and bone fragments and body parts and scatter them far and wide. It's claimed that this case resulted in the second highest number of unidentified human remnants in terms of parts, second only to the World Trade Center collapse. I have not verified that claim, but it is one made by an authority, the coroner on the Hulu documentary series.
And
So you have this awful situation that kind of still is playing out to this day.
now, what was it that attracted you to this case? I mean, you and I both kind of, again, we wander with some uh, unique individuals. We
Mhm.
hang out, we steam with these people. I don't think that personally I found a case that is this horrific that I would really be able to go and sink my teeth into properly. What was it that really sparked your interest in it?
Well, when I write a book, I am sometimes guilty of jumping into a project, and it turns out there is not as much of a story there as I thought there was. And unfortunately, sometimes those books don't get written. But in this particular case, what spoke to me was the fact that these men were essentially going unremembered. They were sitting in boxes, evidence boxes on shelves in archives. They had not been given a Christian burial or any kind of formal burial at all, which, as we're aware, can sometimes contribute to a haunting. They were forgotten by all but a few of their nearest and dearest, you know, and some of them, their fates were completely unknown. Some of these individuals, and this was just proven in the last few weeks, were not even on any missing list. They just disappeared, and nobody had reported them missing even. So these were voices that their story had been all but forgotten. I know a documentary film had been made by a filmmaker called Dan Hall. That was covering the haunting itself. I know that Ghost Adventures had done an episode at Fox Hollow Farm, which is where I heard about the paranormal aspects of the case. And there was one book written about the case called Where the Bodies Are Buried, which I'm not a big fan of because even the title is wrong. There were no bodies buried, you know. So I wanted to take a look into the case and shed some light on it, and hopefully um, keep their names, their identities, their stories alive a little bit. That was my hope.
Now, Herb was also a suspect in another string of murders, correct?
Yeah, he's known as the I-70 Strangler. And it's important to make this distinction because to this day, he is an alleged serial killer. He was never charged with a single
Right.
murder. He was never convicted, obviously,
Yeah.
of any murders either. Um, and so there is a school of thought that says that when he was actually discovered, if he had been able to brazen it out and invoke the right to a speedy trial, which I believe is 70 days in Indiana, they have to have you on trial. The detectives couldn't even assemble a case in that much time. They were still putting together remains. They had the whole fire department on its hands and knees, pulling up bone fragments. So anyway, Herb is also known as the I-70 Strangler because whenever a serial killer is uncovered, detectives will look at unsolved murders, disappearances, things of that nature, and see if they fit the pattern. And lo and behold, throughout the 1980s and into the early 90s, a string of murders, 10 of them in all, I believe, along the interstate linking Indiana and Ohio.
Mhm.
These were all young men, one as young as 14, awfully, that were strangled, which was Herb Baumeister's MO, and dumped within fairly close distance to the interstate as if they'd been hitchhiking and had been picked up. Now, this tracked with routes that Herb took on business trips for his job, solo trips that he took along that same interstate at around those same times. So he is a very strong fit for the I-70 stranglings as well.
That's to me is amazing. Now,
Well, Tim, I'm sorry to interrupt. One
oh, go
thing as
ahead,
well I should
please,
add
please.
is that those murders stopped when the Baumeisters bought Fox Hollow Farm and moved in because now Herb had a playground.
Wow. Now, I want to just go back to something that you did say, because when they showed in the documentary about uh, about when they started to go and they started finding the remains, the question came up: how come they did not bring him in for questioning?
Yeah.
And that was an important part that they really didn't. They kind of glossed over. Uh, was the 70 days to a speedy trial. And when you have something of that magnitude, and people don't realize, and you hit the nail on the head. It's the second largest assembly of human remain fragments uh, in the United States. There's just no way that you can forensically be able to go and handle that. Even if you had 100 pathologists there, there's just no way. And now the remains themselves, I mean, people automatically were thinking to themselves when I talked to other people about this, well, I don't understand why they didn't just go and assemble them and put them all together and then do some DNA testing, blah, blah, blah. Why didn't they do that? I want to ask you that.
Yeah.
I know why, but I want to ask you to explain it because I know you can explain it so much better than I can.
Well, first of all, we're talking about the mid 90s when DNA sampling was in its relative infancy. It is not a simple thing to do today with the computational abilities that we have and technologies. Back then, it was a very different kettle of fish entirely. So, it was not that simple. And just finding all of those remains, I mean, bone fragments still turn up at Fox Hollow Farm to this day.
Wow.
So they had people looking for those remains, responders, law enforcement people, volunteers. They had these people on their hands and knees for weeks, and they still did not find all of these bones and bone fragments. So it was a pretty difficult case. Now that being said, I'm not making excuses for the way the case was investigated either. I do think it's fair to say that stronger efforts could and should have been made in apprehending Herb Baumeister and prosecuting him prior to him eluding justice by taking his own life.
Now, people in this day and age, this year, they don't understand what it was like back in the 1980s and 1990s. If you were
Yeah,
gay, people uh, just wrote you off. You were
yeah,
a subculture that basically middle and upper class America could have cared less about. And I mean, as someone, and my joke is always, I've lived through disco. But if you actually went and lived through that time era, excuse me, you know that you had the HIV
yeah,
AIDS epidemic that was going on. You had the backlash. You had of uh, you know politicians, and actually, I don't want Anita Bryant was huge in the anti-gay movement and everything. they were a forgotten subculture. So I understand. I don't agree. I have to agree with you 100%, but I don't agree with the way that they conducted it because I think they just glossed it over. Yeah, people, they just disappear, and that's an unfortunate thing, and that's a blot on that time era. It really is.
You know, and I do write books about true crime. I try. You inevitably become an armchair quarterback, um, and so I think I
Yes,
can see both sides. When it comes to law enforcement, as a 911 paramedic, I'm very pro police in that those men and women do a very thankless job, and they have my back in some
hmm
situations, and they make sure I go home. That being said, you know, there are in any profession the people who are short timers, graduated bottom of the class, shouldn't be doing that job. It's true in medicine. It's true in any field you might name.
I
Um,
agree. I
and
agree.
and and I hate to say this, but in the Baumeister case, I do believe that had his victim had white college girls been disappearing, then you know, had we seen sorority girls disappearing, we would have seen double the effort. We would have seen federal involvement at a much higher level. We would have seen all kinds of resources thrown at this. But serial killers have and do continue to target the marginalized. They target people that they hope won't be missed. And that was very much the gay community in the 1990s, you know, certainly the early to mid 1990s. Um,
It's
and, you
also
know,
it's also the same right now with the Native American communities too.
mhm,
And I mean, I know so many on the reservations, and this is
yes.
a nationwide phenomena that's happening, and we all know it. And it's unfortunately right now we were just starting to pick up momentum to have something done with it.
Right, and so serial killers, you know, they look for those opportunities, people that will not be missed or are less likely to be missed, and that is what Herr Baumeister excelled at. And so, you know, tragically, it was the perfect storm. He had a playground. I hate to call it that, but that's what Fox Hollow was for him, a place he could take these men uninterrupted. Now, within the gay community itself, people were screaming about this. People were saying, hey, we are
Mhm.
disappearing. They were putting up, have you seen this person signs in gay bars? And Baumeister was in those bars. You know, he walked right by those signs. He knew what had happened to those men. And, it's pretty sickening that he was able to get away with what he did. And we like to think this wouldn't happen today. I mean, today we live in an age where, you know, most of us have a cell phone in our pocket. We are
Right.
trackable. Fox Hollow Farm would certainly be on the radar a lot sooner did this happen today. But yeah, it's a tragic and awful case.
It really is. It truly is. And we're hanging out with author extraordinaire Richard Estep, who has written a fantastic book, The Horrors of Fox Hollow Farm. This is a great book. Buy it. Now I'm going to go and put the right photograph up for the right person. I have to apologize for that earlier. Robert Graves. How did you meet him? What was it like? Because I come into contact with a lot of people who have that will go and email me and say X, Y, and Z is going on in my house or whatever. How did you come into contact with Robert Graves?
I wrote to Rob, and there he
Yeah, we
there
got
Rob is, and those are the doors behind him which lead to the pool at Fox Hollow. So these are the doors through which Baumeister would have carried or dragged his victims out into the woods. And Rob's sitting on what is now his back patio, being interviewed, presumably. I reached out to him and I said, you know, I've written several books. I try and write about things that I find important. I try and write in a sensitive way. I don't want to sensationalize. I don't want this to be lurid. Um, and that is, oh, by the way, a reason why I'm not a fan of the title of the book, The Horrors of Fox Hollow Farm. It was not my choice, and let's just leave that there. But
Mhm.
I wanted to tell the story with some sensitivity, if at all possible. My biggest fear with this book was that family members of those men would see the book, would open it, and they would think someone was either trying to cash in on the misery that their loved ones had endured, or also would look at the book and think, is my loved one, you know, still in some way stuck in this place with the ghost of this ghastly man? So when I write that book, when I wrote the book, and if you read it, you know, you can attest to this, Tim, I don't actually come down and tell you 100% what is behind the haunting at Fox Hollow Farm, because I don't know. and nor do you, and nor does anybody. I
Hmm.
brought in different mediums. They have different opinions about who and what is haunting the farm. And I like to let the reader make up their own mind. So with the book finished, I think that I accomplished my goal, and Rob, as co-author, was very helpful with that. Um, I'm proud of the book. I stand by what I've written in it. And what really brings me joy at the moment is that the book. So I did not have any involvement with the TV series other than they leased the rights from the book from Rob and myself. But the TV series has spurred hundreds of people to come forward and offer DNA samples to help identify those men.
That's amazing
It
because
is.
now people, again, you hit the nail right on the head. The time, 1990s, most of us weren't aware of the importance of DNA until the O.J. Simpson trials.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that really, I think, is commendable because now there's a good chance that names can be given to these poor faceless victims. And that's what's so important. I got to ask you, and they talked a little bit about it on the documentary, but did Robert ever say to you why he bought that property? Because I know stigmatized properties are
Mm-hmm.
really tough to sell. Uh, I know, like here in New York State, something of that nature is brutal. We know Amityville is a gawker's paradise because it's that close to the road. Whether or not they changed the address and
Sure.
changed a little bit of it cosmetically, but the idea is that it happened there. Why did he buy it?
Well, I asked him that very question, and he said, well, number one, he and his wife are what they like to describe as horse people. And Fox Hollow Farm has stables. So it also has, places to run horses. So it's an equestrian enthusiast's dream. And so they were looking for a property that would have that kind of accommodation, horse related. And then when they toured Fox Hollow Farm, they initially didn't know that the Baumeister story. The realtor disclosed, as you have to do, that the property had this macabre history. And Rob and his wife Vicky, they had this conversation and like, are we okay living here? Now, without getting into numbers, Rob will tell you that they got the house at a significant discount. So they got a very good deal on the property. They just had to be okay living with the events which took place there. And I think many people could not. Many people could not live in a house like that knowing what had taken place there. But Rob and Vicky and their kids are okay with it. So more power to them.
I give them credit. I give them so much
Yeah.
credit, especially he did during the interview. He did say the amount of work that he had to do because we all know that a property that is left within just a few years it just starts to crumble. So he had
Raccoons were the only residents when they moved in.
oh dear Lord, and they do so much damage. It's amazing and what he's done with it. Plus, on top of it, it is a daily chore. It is a grind just trying to keep up.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I give
And
him so much
Tim, the other
credit.
thing is like properties like this are usually destroyed. They're usually demolished. And
Right.
the logic behind it is very sound. Nobody wants them to become lighthouses to attract, ghouls and serial killer aficionados or things of that nature. And I get it too, that the people of Westfield and Carmel in Indiana, they don't want this influx of people coming to look at the murder house. I get it. I wouldn't want that either.
Right.
Um, so, there was some talk about actually banding together and buying the house and having it demolished. And if that happened, I don't think anybody would blame them. On the
No,
flip
not at
side of
all.
the coin, though, I like the idea that this horrific thing happened and then the family moves in. And, yes, there's been paranormal activity and some of it was quite frightening. However, it is significantly diminished today than what it was. And I like the idea that the family life is almost erasing this stain. The idea, and you're the energy guy, Tim. You're more of the esoteric side of the paranormal than I am. I'm a nuts and bolts guy and a storyteller. But do you think there's something to this possibility that if you infuse enough positive energy into a place that has seen great darkness, the light can eventually erase that stain? Is that a
I
thing?
I agree 100%. You and I had a conversation on a project that I'm still working on. about can negative energy that's imprinted in a location, can it be reawakened if the right person comes in at the right time?
Mm.
And I feel the same can happen with negative energy, with the right people that come in with the right mindset and go and just kind of live their lives. Number one thing that we have to do in any kind of haunting, especially if it is a negative, you know me, I'm not a demon and angel guy, but if it's sort of a nasty haunting, number one is education of the client. Make sure they understand exactly what happened there.
Mm.
Everything's got to be transparent. Number two, how to deal with it. What are we dealing with? And that
Yeah.
usually comes in with the paranormal aspect. But number three, how to lessen it. And when you start working with anything that may be parasitical in nature or residual, where it just keeps repeating itself, you know, a site of a tragedy, battlefields, forts, and massacre sites, start going about your business every day and just living a good life, not trying to go and cash in on it or just going and living the normal life. You'll start to see all of this kind of negative stuff, the scary stuff starting to go and lessen. And I'm a firm believer in that. I'm a firm believer that you can introduce positive energy into a negative location such as that. And that was a question I was going to ask you because so many people in the paranormal, they kind of go and they kind of just take something that may be negative and automatically it's a demon. There's not much you can do about it. You can go bless it and maybe it'll go, maybe not. It's the whole lifestyle. And I believe that a positive lifestyle imprints upon a negative location and changes everything, changes the 100% of the dynamic. So that's my TED talk for today. No, listen, Richard, nobody wants to hear me prattle on. It's all about you today.
Well, it's Tim talk, isn't it?
Tim talk is boring. Richard talk is more important. Is more interesting. I want to ask you, uh, when the Graves bought the house,
Hmm.
there was and I believe there still is. I think in the book you said that one of the sons lived there, or that's now it's her bedroom. That used to be an apartment, like
Hmm.
it would be an in-law apartment,
Yeah.
and they had a friend that was living there that had some really crazy things that paranormally happened while he was there. And I got to tell you what, it's like the old joke. Uh, I go up there, something happens. I'm not living here anymore. I'm gone. This guy stayed, and I give him so much credit. Could you tell everybody about that? Because that's something that and the gentleman that was seen, like only half of him was seen, and he was wearing a red shirt. Those are the two things that just fascinated me.
Yeah. So Rob was not, and to a degree, is not a huge believer in ghosts and the paranormal. When we worked on this book, he said, "Listen, you do all the ghost stuff. That's your wheelhouse, and I'm gonna write about Herb Baumeister and the murders." Which he's very well versed in that. So it was a very good, fair, and sensible division of labor when we wrote that manuscript. So Rob and Vicky moved into the house. His Vicky has a background in medical sciences also, so this is a very down to earth,
Hmm.
well-educated lady. And strange things started happening around the house. So the flex of a vacuum cleaner, the power cord was pulled out of the wall as if it was yanked. Now, it's easy to write stuff like that off at first. I mean, I've tripped over my own vacuum cleaner power cable. I couldn't tell you how many times. So you start to think, did that really happen? Or did I just, kind of get under my own feet? But what she couldn't ignore was one day she was outside and saw a young man walking through the trees. This young man had a red shirt, which is why he drew her eye. And she was just about to tell Rob, "Hey, we've got a trespasser," when she realized, "Wait a minute, he's not. He has no legs. This young man is legless." And as she watched, he disappeared, literally disappeared in front of her eyes in the trees. Now, the lodger, Joe LeBlanc, who moved in, uh, and I think Joe's arrival was a catalyst for the haunting because Joe was about the same age as some of her Baumeister's victims. He moved into the in-law quarters, which are kind of attached to the side of the main house, and instantly started having nightmares that he was being chased through the woods at Fox Hollow Farm by something he could never see. He would never, in the dreams, like turn around and see anything. But he started dreaming about, he was running for his life. Then one night he's walking his dog along the driveway, and this is an extremely long, winding driveway. And the dog runs off into the tree line. So Joe goes after it and comes face to face with this young man in a red shirt in the trees, who then disappears. And it is only when he and Vicky put their notes together, compare notes, that they realized that they both saw the same young man in the trees. And I won't name the one, but they positively identified this man as one of
Right.
Herb victims.
That's amazing. I have to, I have to say it was Joe's uh, experiences
Hmm.
was crazy, because if you think about it, Herb, when he was having difficulties with his wife, lived there for a while.
He
He
did.
actually he actually that he used that as his bedroom. Now, on so many occasions, could you imagine? Now, oh, I know what I was going to ask you. Wasn't there an occasion where, like, if Herb locked himself out, he'd be banging on a door?
Yeah, usually at around 3 a.m. And Joe noticed that the door
Right,
knocker, which is in the shape of a horse's head, I thought that was pretty cool. Um, would like it would be start hammering and pounding on
right.
the inside door at around the same time every morning.
That's
Um,
crazy. That's
yeah,
crazy. There.
it was
That's
terrible,
crazy.
absolutely
The
terrible.
other thing I wanted to comment on was, now I don't. This is not a worldwide theory, but in my experience and the experience of some of my mentors, I was always told, if you see a full apparition, there's a good chance it's residual. But if you see partial, that may be more intelligent. And I don't know why or how, but this is something that in my experience, that I've actually seen, and that I felt that was more intelligent than just a full-bodied apparition walking across, like, let's say, at a fort parade ground.
Yeah, I'd not
So
heard.
yeah, that's something that that comes from the old spiritualist days. I'm going to be honest with you, Richard. I'm showing my age now. Uh, did I want to ask you? Did the police find any trophies? Now we know that they found the remains, human remains. Was there any trophies? Because we know serial killers have, like, a penchant to go and collect things.
Yeah, it's been said that some of the mannequins that Herb kept, and he would
Yes.
keep shop dummy kind of mannequins, that some of them were clothed in the clothes of his victims. Um,
Wow. I did that.
so
That's amazing.
yeah, that's a pretty sad and sick thing to do. But Herb wasn't really so much of a trophy killer. Now, that being said, he's believed to have videoed his experiences with the men, the
That's right.
sexual activity and the murders. And when he was arrested, sorry, not arrested, uh, briefly, he found out that they were looking to bring him in. So he got in his car, he drove for the border, crossed the Canadian border by ground. And a Canadian Mountie actually found him in his car sleeping under a bridge one night, the night before his death. And so, knocked on the windshield, said, "Hey, sir, you can't sleep here." And afterwards, the officer noted that there was
Yeah.
a box of VHS tapes on the back seat of his car. Now, when his car and his dead body were found on the shores of a lake, he was dead of an apparently self-inflicted gunshot wound. Those VHS tapes were nowhere to be seen.
So
Presumably at the
yeah.
bottom of a lake somewhere, but who knows? But I think in terms of keeping something, he kept VHS tapes. It's believed of the murders that he committed.
Now, the I guess the police started the whole investigation rolling because of a gentleman who claimed at the time that he knew Herb, and Herb had taken him out to the
Mhm.
house and attempted to asphyxiate him. And again, this was a sexual thing, and that is what really kind of got everybody spurred on. I have to ask you, before we get into any of the paranormal stuff that you experience, in the book, it's an alias, correct? Tony is
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And on the doc, they give him the name. I guess his first name is Mark. But
Mark
Uh,
Goodyear, yeah, he's since come forward, but when I wrote the book, he insisted on relative
yeah.
anonymity, so we gave him a pseudonym.
Uh, he later on, and I can totally understand why he would not go and admit having a longer term relationship with her
Mhm,
than he mentioned, because he would automatically be, you know, looked at as an accomplice.
mhm.
The doc really kind of doesn't paint him in the best light. I don't know if that was at least for my in my opinion.
Do
I
you
don't know.
think Tim the Doc doesn't, or do you think that he does himself no favors in the doc?
He does himself no favors. And the biggest, but a producer, and you know as well as I do, a producer loves to get someone riled up and
Mhm.
get so that the interview pops. You know that as
Yeah.
well as I do. So that was one of the things that I was thinking to myself, what were they saying during those edited clips that got him really upset, really rolling? I wanted to ask you about him. Was he like that when you interviewed him? And do you think, what was your gut feeling? I'm not going to ask you what's your opinion if he did or he didn't. What was your gut feeling to him about him?
So I spent a full day with him. I spent time in the woods alone with him. I did extensive interviews. I have extensive video and audio, footage of those interviews still. And Mark likes to tell stories. He likes to be the center of attention, and it's important to there's a degree of showmanship and flamboyance. He can hold an audience captive in the palm of his hand as he tells you about his experiences. And on the one hand, he is the only primary source we have regarding what happened inside Fox Hollow Farm during that period. On the other hand, he will outright tell you, and he certainly told me to my face, you're never going to know when I'm telling you the truth or not. So there are times he will outright, obfuscate, conflate facts, things of that nature. So it's tough because you don't know what to believe. And I would say a good 70% of what he told me um, ended up not going in my book because I couldn't corroborate it. And some of it was so wild as to be frankly unbelievable. Um, and so it's difficult. I know that had putting yourself in his shoes for a minute, because a lot of people are saying after the documentary, he's clearly an accomplice. He was clearly more involved than anybody let on. This guy should be investigated, all that kind of stuff. And I can see why people would think that. I don't know for sure either way. Um, but I would say that number one, he did go to the police and tell them that these murders were happening. So,
Right, right.
and the other thing to note about him is if you are guilty of this kind of thing, why do you then go on TV and put your face and your real name out there? Wouldn't you fly under the radar as much as you possibly could? Why appear on camera? Why even cooperate with an author like me that's writing a book about this story? Wouldn't you just disappear?
I agree. I agree
Unless
100%. Those are the same questions that I asked.
Mhm.
And I think, and we know how productions can be slanted
They
one
can
way
and
or
do.
the other.
Yeah.
And we know what they're looking for. They're looking to get on the air. They're looking to make things pop. They're looking to sell commercial time. We know that we know the industry. So I did, to me, yes, he was flamboyant. Yes, I don't, and I had questions about it, whether he did it or he didn't, but he became a tragic figure to me because now he has to feel that he has to be out there and sometimes inflate the story or whatever. So to me, he became an interesting but yet tragic figure. And I wondered what your gut feeling was about him. So thank you for clarifying that. That clarified a lot to me. Now I want to ask you about when you started investigating that first time you went out there. And we've talked about you going into like the uh, different murder houses where you stayed
Mhm.
overnight, and what did you feel and everything. What was your take when you first had the opportunity to walk into that house?
It's interesting because it speaks towards bias, and your imagination is your own worst enemy sometimes. So I wish I'd had an opportunity to do it. I don't know that you even could anymore. But I wish that I'd had the opportunity to bring in someone that was completely ignorant of what happened in that house and have
Hmm.
them stay for a weekend and see what they felt like and see what happened, Um, because knowing that when I walked down the steps that lead from the kitchen to the basement, to the swimming pool and to the wet bar, I knew that coming down those steps, probably as many as 17, 18, maybe 19 men or more came down those steps and never got to go back up. And that kind of sits heavy with you. I'm not a psychic or a sensitive or a medium, whatever you want to call it. Um, but I could kind of feel that, it weighed heavily on me. So I think that as you walk around that house, it's a beautiful house and it's a family home. It's done in dark wood and very elegant and stuff like that. But when you know what took place there, it's very difficult to get beyond that for me. Um, I would sleep with one eye open if that were my house. But how much of that is just, my own imagination conjuring up these images and these feelings? Um,
Exactly.
I would say that being imaginative is not a great quality in a paranormal investigator because it
Oh,
works against you.
I agree 100% because I don't know how many investigators that walk in and they're biased automatically. And
All of us,
uh,
100%.
I mean, and I think what, like, when I was working with the people at Paranormal State, I liked the fact that they actually went and I was blindfolded and I had no clue where I was going to end up. And to be honest, I didn't recognize really anywhere that initially where they took me.
Mhm.
And I think that was a little bit easier for me to just go and give a objective reading rather than
Mhm.
having anything in the back of my mind going, oh well, this is a room that somebody died in, this is what
Right.
I'm getting. So I agree with you 100% with that. What would you say is the most what was the most active area within that house to you guys
The
as
pool.
investigators?
Hands down the pool and the basement downstairs. Um, I mean, it's believed that in the pool or at the poolside or the wet bar, which is immediately to the right of this photograph, behind the basketball hoop, separated by a glass window. That's where most of the murders are supposedly have taken place. And the pool, I think, is the hot spot, and that whole basement level. Not to say things don't happen in other parts of the house, but this would be the place to really focus time and attention. And we did. I got in that pool and swam.
I was going to bring that up. I was going to bring that up. I think that was great that you did that to experience it. What would you say was the strongest evidence that you guys picked up in that home?
So ruling out certain experiential things, the one that I personally can still feel is that when we were in the pump room, which was the door off to the left,
Hmm.
you can see there. We were in there doing an EVP session, and I felt very clearly fingertips caressing my tricep like that, like running
Wow.
along the inside of my arm. Wasn't cobwebs, wasn't insects. I was on camera, and it was the creepiest thing, just like, oh, that's I can still feel it today and I shiver. But that's not objective. And any skeptic is going to look at that and say, it's a completely subjective experience. You imagined it. Um, Fair enough. Throwing that out, I think we got some EVPs that were very interesting. One was when I was swimming in the pool, the word Laura was whispered, and Laura happens to be the name of my wife, which was
Oh,
quite
yes,
creepy.
that's right.
And we had just played what we were told by Mark Goodyear was Herb's favorite song, Blue Bayou by Linda Ronstadt. And then we had also played like a bunch of like disco party music, the kind of stuff you might have heard in clubs during the 90s, just as an era cue,
Right.
as it's called. The idea that you can kind of stimulate things by introducing, music from that time period. And so there was that, but then also I'd gone into the woods with Mark Goodyear to one of the um, body piles where the bodies have been disposed of, the burn piles. And he said there's still remains under here that have not been found. And they may never be found. And I'm like, under this spot right here. And he said, yeah. So me being me, this is not an open case. This is not a crime scene. Nobody's gonna look into this if we don't. So I'm like, let's get some shovels, let's get some
Hmm.
gardening equipment, and let's dig.
Yeah.
And we dug. And not a thing, no evidence of remains or anything like that. So another miss by Mr. Goodyear. However, I always left recorders running. I learned a long time ago, to my great chagrin, that you need to leave a recorder running 100% of the time you're in a location. Maybe don't take it into the bathroom with you, but leave it outside, because it seems to be always when the recorders are off that stuff happens. And
This is exactly it. And we just had this conversation the other
yeah,
day, because now everybody wants to do the blast. Question, 30 seconds. Okay.
mhm.
That's not where you get your evidence. You're 100% right, because if you
No.
go, and it's okay to do that, but if you're going to go and properly investigate a location, 100%, everything has got to be documented. Everything has got to be recorded.
And the way I do it, the reason I do this is I leave a recorder running continuously, but that's my master. I then use a separate recorder for burst EVPs and things like that.
Hmm.
The reason is that when I write a book, I don't just do this from memory. When you read dialogue in one of my books, this isn't fiction. It's not stuff I'm half-assing. This is a recording of what people said. And I might change like a cannot to a can't, or things like that. But what you're reading is what was said. And so I need to be able to pick out what was said by who in what spot. And we very clearly recorded the sound of it's like an older, raspy male voice saying, "Get away from there." Genuinely creepy as we were
Was
digging.
was there any one time that you or your crew really, and I don't want to say terrified, because I don't, when I read the book, I didn't get that sense of being terrified, as in the, some of the TV shows where people are running,
Hmm.
run dude run type thing.
Yeah.
Is there any time that you guys were like, because I know myself, I've been in certain situations where I like, you know what, this isn't really, this isn't good. I'm going to go and I'm just going to back off a little bit.
Not so much that. This is one of the few cases I was willing to provoke. I normally don't,
Hmm.
but I believe in showing respect to people alive or dead. I'll make an exception if you are a serial killer and a generally appalling human being. I don't feel the need to be respectful to you then. But I was also cognizant of the fact that we may be dealing with other spirits that had been traumatized enough. So it was a fine line. However, I think one of the more disturbing moments was when we wrapped up the last night. We ended up leaving at about 4 a.m. So we packed up all of our equipment. Rob and Vicky were asleep upstairs. We didn't want to disturb them. So we'd finished in the swimming pool. We loaded our rental car, and for that night, we'd checked into a hotel so that before catching our flight the next day, we would have some sleep. So we get back to the hotel by about 5 a.m., I think it was. Head hits the pillow. I'm fast asleep. 15 minutes later, the phone is ringing, my cell phone, and I answer it. And it's Vicky Graves. She's like, "Richard, your team has been very nice and professional. We've appreciated how unintrusive you've been. But Rob and I are trying to sleep. We have work today. Can you please stop stomping around downstairs?" And I said, "Vicky, I don't know how to break this to you, but we're in a hotel like 10 miles away." And
What
she's
was
like,
her reaction to that?
"Rob, get the gun." Her reaction was instantly human intruder. So Rob
Right.
goes downstairs, and what he finds is that the patio door, the sliding door, which we had definitely secured behind us, was open.
Wow. That's amazing. That's
It's
amazing.
almost as if whoever it was had waited for us to clear out. They'd like held it. It's like I always imagine this as like when you have those visitors to your house that you don't want, right? Every so often you'll do an obligation visitor, right? Maybe it's an in-law, maybe it's a friend of a friend, or whatever it is.
Hmm.
And then you hold it and hold it and hold it. And then when they leave, you're like, ah, thank God they're gone. I kind of think maybe it was that. Like they were just so glad to see the back of us. These people, these strangers that had moved in for like 4 days and nights and were asking all these questions and poking into their affairs. I think they were glad to be shot of us.
I see. I agree with that assessment. I agree 100% with that assessment.
Mm.
Last question. This was something that I think was brought up. I can't remember if it was brought up on the doc, but a friend of mine, when I was telling him that you were going to be on the show, he wanted to know, do they ever allow people to come to that site. Now, again, you get your gawkers, you get your serial killer, aficionados, you get these people, the dark tourism, which is really big
Yep.
now. Do they ever allow people on the site?
Not anymore. It is a private home and a private residence, and I think it's fair to say that some of the individuals, because they used to do ghost tours, they used to allow people to come in and do public investigations and stuff. They stopped doing that fairly quickly.
Good,
Um,
good.
since the show aired, everybody is an expert on Fox. It's amazing how many people that have never been to that location are suddenly an expert in that case and the haunting.
Yeah, we know
They
how that
want,
works.
yeah, yeah, they want to lecture me on what's really happening there, and they want to share their psychic sensitivities, none of which match, by the way.
Hmm.
They're all different. And I think the family, understandably, has just had enough.
Good,
And so,
good.
yeah, so I understand why they would take that route. Um, and I ask people to just respect their privacy.
And what people don't understand, and I'm very, and you and I have tramped Gettysburg and
Hmm.
wilderness and different battlefields. It is a hallowed place. It is a
Hmm.
burial site, like you said, and what was brought up on the on the dock. There are still remains out there.
Hmm.
We don't know how many. We don't know who they're with. I think the estimate was we've gotten half of the remains that are still out there. Treat it with respect. And let's not go and stir anything up. Let's not go and allow something that should be
Hmm.
memorialized. Let's just leave it the way it is. Richard, I
Yeah,
want to
I
before we
agree.
go on, we're already running out of time, Richard, and I don't want to keep you because I know that you work, because I wrote to you last night and you were up, so I figured you were on the job. Uh, Richard, how can they get a hold of your books? How can they find out more about you, and and where are you going to be?
Yeah. You can get my books in all the usual places, of course. There are the big online retailers, but you can also have your local mom and pop independently owned bookstore order them in. And I'm a big fan of that, supporting local small
Hmm.
businesses. You can see me at various events this year. You can see me at Tinker Swiss Cottage and investigate with me there in Rockford, Illinois. You can see me at my Ashmore Estates event in a couple of weeks is sold out, I'm afraid. But you can see me at Phenomicon in Utah, near Skinwalker Ranch, which is quite a cool location. Um, I have a lot of events coming up this year. If you guys watch my page, you'll also catch me at Strange Escapes as well. I love doing those events. Um, I am definitely around at paranormal events. Quite a few of them, and I encourage folks to continue to investigate the paranormal respectfully. If you have questions for me, see me online, richardestep.net. You can shoot me an email. You can send one to one of my socials, Richard Estep Author, um, on Facebook. I'm estep.richard on Instagram, just to be contrary, and Estep Writes on TikTok. Um, I love sharing stories with people. The only question I got to answer in advance is, though, no, I cannot get you into Fox Hollow Farm.
Good for you. Good for you, Richard. And also, we'll be at the Sage Paracon up in Belgrove, Virginia
That's
again.
right. Yeah,
The two
MJ's
of us
gonna
will be up
smack me
there.
upside the head for not promoting that.
Yeah.
Sage Marathon in Belgrove.
Yeah. I've never been
Always
up there, so I look forward to it. But you know
to
what, Richard? I always look forward to working with you, and it's always been an honor to know you. And I got a chance to, I think it was last year that we actually met, and you gave me an advanced copy of your In Search of Demons work, which is phenomenal. Anybody that is interested in this phenomena, in this whole idea, this concept, please read it, because he has gotten some of the best interviews of what people believe they truly are, with some of the greatest. I don't like to say experts, but I will say people in the know. So, Richard, thank you so much. Stay on the air. I want to thank you, well and personally off the air. I will be right back. Thank you again, Richard. I owe you for this interview. You know that now.
always a pleasure, my friend. Always a pleasure, and thank you.
Guys, Richard is probably one of the most interesting people that I've ever met. He's a prolific writer. Please go out, support him, buy his books, and follow him, because I never know what he's going to be up to next. And it's always an adventure. Guys, be kind, Be good. Ciao, babies. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.